Did you know? When it comes to piano finger technique, you should always be progressively observing the range of notes within a passage of music. Here we have this collection of notes in our left hand, and the first thing we're going to do is observe the range. The bottom note of a range is this F way down here, and the top note of this range is A flat. And that's generally going to be giving you your hand position because your bottom fingers are going to play the bottom notes and your top fingers are going to play the top notes. But that's not all. Remember, I use the word progressive. And what that means in this case is that we should be looking ahead as to what's happening next. And I want to bring this up because if the next notes were notes that continued to go up here, for example, that would cause you to make different considerations when it comes to your finger technique. So for example, when we had this grouping of notes, we could finish on 2, but if we were continuing to go up, maybe I would do 4 instead. Piano teacher Tim here. Welcome, students. This channel is all about giving practical piano advice to everyday people. Speaking of which, let's get on to tip number 2, which is the idea of finger technique is to never run out of fingers. And there's no better example of this than Bach's invention number 4 in D minor. So here we have our first pattern of notes. We're just looking at the first measure here. And if I just try to play this without any consideration to the fingers, I've run out of fingers to complete that first measure of notes. So what happens, what a lot of beginner students will do, is they'll repeat the 5th finger to hit all the top notes, which is a bad idea. And I'll let you listen why. Hear that? Sounds pretty disjointed, eh? Whereas that sounds a lot better. So the solution, whatever you run out of fingers, is to add in, you need to add in some kind of finger crossings to make the passage playable. And you have a few options. The first option is to use the same fingering I would use for the D minor scale. And that works out okay. The only flaw to doing that is I end on finger 3 here. Kind of have to make a big jump between there, but it's not really as big of a deal, so it's okay. Scale fingering works just fine. However, what my piano teacher taught me, specifically with this piece, but it works anytime you have a note just outside of your range. Here's a solution. Start it out with a finger cross. So we're starting out with finger 2, 1, and it sets you up perfectly, like I was saying before. You're hitting 5th finger on that B flat now, and you can smoothly play the rest of the notes in that passage. Whereas before, like I said, you ended on finger 3 here, and you had to kind of make a bigger jump between this B flat and C sharp. This brings me to tip number 3, which is that trial and error are your friends. Always be open-minded to trying new different fingering. If you feel like it's not working, if it seems wrong, it probably is, and always be willing to change it. Let me show you a great example. So here we have another left-hand pattern, pretty similar to what we had before, where it's some kind of arpeggio. But the fingering they give us for this is just atrocious for me. I don't know what they were thinking, whether this is genuinely a mistake or there's some other thingy behind this, or maybe this fingering works for some people, it just doesn't work for me. For me, like some sort of alteration on the, or just using the arpeggio fingering itself works a lot better for me than what they have written right there. And this brings me to tip number 4. Believe it or not, even though I just showed you something that went into the face of this, when the finger numbers are written in for you by either, it's usually the publisher or the composer writes them in, 99, I would say like 95 to 99% of the time, those are correct and they will steer you in the right direction. You might need to make slight alterations here or there, but generally the notes that are, or the numbers that are written in your music are your friends. Tip number 5, you heard me mention earlier when we were having trouble with some of those other patterns. Do you know what I said? It was actually with this Bach invention number 4 D minor. I can never say it right. Remember, I said the first thing I would try is the scale fingering. So tip number 5 is that to develop basic finger crossings and basic finger technique, you want to learn your scales and arpeggios. And this is the perfect book to do it, the complete book, Scales, Chords, Arpeggios, and Cadences by Alfred. I'll hopefully remember to link you a link in the description, but this is what it looks like. A must-have for any student. You're missing out, actually, if you don't have this. Speaking of scales and arpeggios, chords. The next tip is that the fingering that you learn for chords, root position chords, inversions, seventh chords, or even arpeggios, and you heard me mention that with the other example we had, that those fingerings carry over almost exactly. So what I mean is that if you have a major chord in your piece and it's in root position, you're almost always going to be using 5-3-1. Almost always. The only other exception is maybe if you had some sort of weird pattern like that. But generally 5-3-1. First inversion chords, still 5-3-1. People always ask me, can I use 5-2 or 5-4? For me, that doesn't feel comfortable. 5-3-1 does the trick. 5-2-1 for first inversion. And then all the seventh chords have different fingerings all on their own. If you want me to make a lesson about chords and all the different fingering techniques to use, let me know in the comments. I would actually really like to know if you guys need that. But on to the next thing.
Whoa.
Tip number 7 is to write in your fingering so you can maintain consistent fingering every time you practice. You'd be really surprised how often you'll come up with a fingering for like a pattern, and then like over the next couple of days, and there's so many notes to remember, that all of a sudden you're using different fingering each time. This used to happen to me. My piano teacher was furious for obvious reasons. So make sure that you're writing in the fingering. And actually, one more thing I want to say. If I saw a student, right, and they had all of their their page was just filled with numbers, I wouldn't care at all. In fact, I would be very, very pleased, because it tells me that that student is taking careful consideration into their finger numbers. And I guess a little number 8 is writing in more fingering is not a bad thing. In fact, I think it's actually a very good thing. Writing in note names, a totally different story. So now that we've gone over all these tips, let's kind of put some into practice. Just take a look at a few examples together. Here's our first example here. It's an example a lot of people know. A lot of people know this one, Minuet in G. Now, a few things I want to talk about is say we're looking at this for the first time. Let's take a look at the right hand first. What is our range in the first measure or two? Well, top note is D, it looks like. Bottom note G, and that tells us we're in the perfect place. However, remember I said progressively observe the range, and if you look, and this is actually why I brought this up, that the range changes, because now E is the top note. And so what that does is that changes where our fingers are going to be positioned here. And luckily for this inverted mordent, they give us the fingering. As I mentioned, that a lot of times when they write in the fingering, it is correct. So in this case, they did us good. Let's check out the left hand, and then we're just going to take a couple measures here and then go to the next one. A little bit more difficult of an example. Hey, look, G major chord using G major fingering. Wow, how about that? And then let's see, really not much going on here with the left hand. We're really just in that G position here, but that gives you the perfect starting place for this piece. Let's take a look at a more complicated example. Let's take a look at the first measure or two of this Chopin Nocturne in E flat major. All right, right hand first. First measure, just this part. What is our range? Well, the bottom note, it looks like, is this B flat, and they want us finger 2 here. I don't know. I'll tell you why I think they want finger 2 here, not 1, in a second. And then it looks like the top number in that range is G. So our bottom fingers are going to be here. Top fingers are going to be around here, at least to start. I mean, looking into the next measure, it does change. But luckily, if we follow the fingering they give us, it works out just perfect. So we have the perfect starting place. Now remember, I said I don't know why they start this with 2 when 1 is actually, I think, a lot more comfortable. And look at the phrasings. This is actually one thing I should have touched on a little bit more in this lesson, is the importance of phrasing, and I did a little bit. But notice how these notes, and you can always tell when things are belong together because they have slur lines. And you can see that these notes in the first measure all have a slur line, and then there's a break right where this B flat is. And then see how at the end of the measure there's a break between that E flat and the B flat. However, this B flat that comes in at the end of measure 1, I would play with finger 1 because you have to continue the rest of the notes in the phrase. So starting with finger 2 would kind of break that, and that's a no-no. Okay, we have this left hand pattern notes here, and this is why I wanted to bring this up. You see how these notes, just taking a look at the first set of notes here, see how there's such a big difference in that range? We got E flat down here, and then our next notes are G and E flat. There is no way you're going to be able to break your hand enough to be able to play those notes. So what you got to do is you're hitting this bottom note here, you're picking up, and then you are slurring those chords together, and that's literally what they have written here. So it's not a big deal that there's a big gap between the bottom note and then these two chords, because Chopin has considered that when writing the piece. It has this kind of pattern to it. And so forth. So again, always be using common sense. Always be paying attention to phrasings too. If there's something weird with the fingering, maybe the phrasing supports it, and it makes suddenly, if you look at that, it makes a lot more sense. All right, we got another example, but if you like this lesson so far, make sure to smash that like button. It helps other students know that this is a quality lesson that they can learn from as well. So here we have Nocturne in B flat minor by Chopin once again. And we're going to take a look at the first few measures. Actually, I want to take the first like 2-3 measures just with the right hand, because there's a lot going on here that I want to talk about. So let's take a look at the range we have. And our range, it looks like the bottom note of our range is really this F here in measure 2, right? Where we have that repeated. And the top note of our range looks like this D flat up here. So that's telling us that our hand position is probably somewhere around here, where D flat's up here and F is down here. Now let's see what we got. So we're starting out with B flat. Now see how that fingering, the original fingering I came up with here, 3, 4, 5, 2, 1, or 2, 3, 1, 1. I repeated that first finger again. Remember when I was talking about before, you don't want to run out of fingers because it sounds disjointed? But this is going to sound weird. I think it kind of works here. Why? Well, look at this phrasing. We actually have a staccato here. They have staccato notes, so they're allowed to be disjointed, and that's why I actually think that actually works out fine. That's actually one instance where you can repeat a finger, and I think it would be okay. Could I come up with a different fingering to where maybe I would land on a different fingering on F? Yeah, sure, that's totally possible. But I think it works for this. Now, remember, progressively observe the range. This is where it gets very important, because when we hit this F here, we actually cannot stay on that F too long. And why is that, do you think, while they erase these? It's because our range has changed, actually. So if you take a look from here to here, the range was D flat and F. However, if you take it from this F and you look progressively ahead, maybe up to here, because that's the end of the phrase, what happens? Our range has changed. Now our range is really, let's see, F, and then G flat looks like the top of our range there, and the bottom note in our range is the B flat. So we've went up from here to here. So how do we account for this, and how do we change? Well, the great thing about having repeated notes in the melody is we can actually use that single note to change our fingering. Like each time you repeat it. And then maybe I wouldn't use finger 5, I'd use finger 4. There we go. So like I said, always trial and error as well. So probably what I would do is starting from the beginning, 3, 4, 5, 2, 1, 3, 1, 1, and then maybe like 2, 3, and then that last one, 4, 5, 4, 3, 1, and then like 2, or maybe even 3, 1. And then see how the range after that, we have to move our hand way up there. Sorry, I haven't played this one in a while, but you get the idea. You'd have to jump your hand considerably from here to here, and that would be a whole different phrase. So just in a couple measures, we were able to implement a lot of the strategies that we talked about today. So let's take a look at our left hand here, because we have another jumble of notes with a really high range here. And maybe we want to talk about how we deal with this, right? Because if we look at the bottom note, B flat, our top note of the range is way up here. So this is an instance where I would do what's called like spidering, where you're like 5, 2, and then you use these top notes to like spider your way up to the top. I know it's not the most like scientific way to describe this. Or maybe climbing, right? You hit these first 2 notes and then you use the top notes to climb, and that's how I would do it. I mean, I would definitely experiment with some different possibilities, as particularly using like whether use finger 3 here, finger 2 here. I would definitely work that out, but that works just fine. So use the spidering technique. It's not really what it's called. That's just what I call it. But anyway, feel free to use that. So just in a couple of examples, you could really see how we can put these things together. If you want me to do like a live stream or another video on this, doing just more and more examples, let me know in the comments. And the next thing you want to do, because this channel is all about giving you the strategies to succeed at piano and music for everyday people like yourself, of course, you want to check out the next video right here. I have a whole collection of videos right on the channel. You're going to love them all. Your piano teacher, Tim here. Thank you so much for coming by, and I'll see you in the next lesson. So long.